Hi, I'm Colin with Blue Marble Consulting, and in this video I'll be covering some topics covered from a training session for the week of March 23rd in Project Systems. And this training session was for a company called Enerflex down in Houston. And just quick background on Enerflex, they supply products and services to the oil and gas production industry. And what this course covered was a lot of intro concepts, so a lot of basic things, and then we kind of moved into some more complex topics towards the end of the week. So on Monday we covered a few different topics. We went over the overview of what we'd be looking at for the week, and we also got into project structuring, and we went over the different types of projects that are available. There's revenue, capital, internal projects, also known as expense projects. It also covered numbering schemas for projects. In addition, we took a look at WPS Elements and what they were and how they're used, and looked at an example in Project Builder of what these WPS elements look like and kind of some basic navigation for these WPS elements. We talked about how they facilitate reporting, how the costs roll up, and they're specific within a project. And this was the project that was used as an example. This is one out of a few that were used. And just went over the WPS elements. We took a look at the hierarchy graphic here, and just showing how this can be another overview of the actual project. In addition, we talked more about this project builder. Following that, we went over how you can find the last projects that you had worked on. So if we go back to that project builder transaction, you can see the last projects that we worked on, how you can save projects, and how you can also save a WPS element from a project. So if you're just working on this plan, WPS, you can save this and then open that up directly. We also talked about the statuses for a project, system statuses, and how you can drill down into these and look at them a little bit further. And we also went over substitution and validation, and unfortunately I didn't have video working at that time, but I was able to hear, and went over substitution and validation and how those two are used to check conditions while posting a document in SAP. So you might get denied if you don't enter in the correct field, which would be validation. And then we went into outlining and creating an actual network. And so this will be the actual network right here, and it's just like a project definition. And the differences between networks and WPS elements is that networks are used for costing and planning. And the way that we can do that is when we go down to this actual network activity, we can plan out costs by time period. So we can say we want this element or this activity to be 100 hours for 10 days and schedule it that way. And each of these networks are mapped to a WPS element. And we also discussed these a little bit further, these activities, and how there are 4 different types. We have our internal and external processing, we have costs and service, and the differences in these different types lie in the master data for creating, changing, and displaying. And so that's what we covered on the first day, which was on Monday. Moving into Tuesday, we were showed how to create a network manually for internal processing. So that would be one of these network activities. And this electrical design activity was created, and there are different ways that you can tell, because these icons are the same, the differences between these 4 different activity types. And the way you can tell the differences between these different types is by which tabs you are brought to on the right-hand side over here. So you can see that the tab that we're on right now is internal, and that's how I know that this is an internal processing activity. When I click down to these other activity types, these are all internal, we can see. Click on this external goods activity type, we're brought to this external tab. And this travel activity, I believe, is costs, so we should be brought to that cost tab. And so that's just the way that you can understand what you're actually looking at. And so once this electrical design was created, we went over just some basic navigation within this. We have the system status, which is right here. We can assign units, so we can say we want this activity to be 100 hours, but we can also change that to any other unit type. Percentages, miles, anything else like that. And this distribution key right here allows you to distribute values entered, such as work hours, on the overview screen for the entire time frame. And then we have our calculation key, and then what this is it allows for calculations and helps plan hours of work. And move down here to these other tabs. We have our dates tab, so we can put in constraints. We want to say we don't want this activity to start before a certain time. We want to start on actual time, etc. We can do the same thing with finish. Moved on to assignments tab, and we talked about the reference point right here. And this creates a link between bills of material and activities. Moved on down to long text, which is pretty explanatory. You can enter whatever you want into here. And then user fields, we can configure these to be, this is a topic that we talked about a lot, is how configurable all of these different tabs are. You can actually take certain tabs out if you don't want them, and configure some of these to change around what these fields actually are. Moved on to qualification. You can plan down to an actual specific person for this tab. And then we finally moved on and talked about progress, which I think is the last tab here. And this is just saying how do you want to measure the progress for this activity element. And you can enter in a plan for how you plan on measuring this. So we can say we want to measure this in the milestones that we set. We can do this by an estimation. We can do this by how much cost we're using for the actual element. And that was what we went over within the kind of basic navigation within this internal processing, this electrical design right here. So after that, we went into creating a network manually for external processing. And let's see, we have one down here which is for external processing. And when you create an external process activity, a purchase requisition will be automatically created once you save it. And so in this external tab, we can see down here we have a purchase requisition number. And from there, we just kind of went over that since we covered all of the basic navigation with all these other tabs. That was the main difference here with the external. And then we took a look at creating a network manually for costs. And that's this travel right here. And this will allow you to do lump sum planning, so plan everything at a high level. It also defaults in a cost element, so we can see right here. Those will automatically be defaulted in. And then we discussed the execution factor. And this is how many times this operation will be carried out during the processing of an order. So after we talked about these three, the internal, external, and costs, we briefly talked about the activity elements. And these just further break down the four activities. There are some differences between them. You can't allocate materials or assign milestones or generate documents from the activity elements. And these also do not have relationships. And you can also take a look at, before we took a look at the hierarchy graphic, but there's also, once you click on a network activity, you can take a look at the network graphic, network structure graphic. And this is, just shows you this in a nice graphical form. The red boxes are indicative of the critical path. and you can create relationships from here very easily. So going back to the actual project builder screen here, we briefly talked about milestones, and I don't think there's any in this project, so I'll open one up that does have it. And what these are allows you to track your progress, like I had briefly talked about earlier. And when these are created, you can choose to click on one of these two we talked about, the progress analysis and the sales document date. And the progress analysis, when this is clicked on, the milestone will become relevant for a specific indicator. So, meaning that this milestone will will show progress based on a percentage complete or on a certain date. This sales document date, when this is clicked on, will allow the milestone to become billable, and the milestone date will then be copied to the invoicing plan. And we just briefly went over these milestones. In addition, we moved from there into how to create a mass change, so how to change something on a large scale within a project. And you can do this within transaction CN MASS. And you can change a lot of different things. I'll show you just some of the few things. You can change start dates, end dates, and quite a lot of things within the project. So I'll wait for this to load and take a look at some of the things that you can change all at once, which can be easy if you have a lot that you need to do, and it's just easier than using it manually. And so, yep, you can change project definitions, WPS Elements. So here's all the different things that you can change within a WPS element. So starts, finishes, cost centers, company code, etc. And you can change that for all of these different things right here. So then we went back into Project Builder, took a look at the project planning board, which is a great tool to look at an entire overview of a project with graphics and with charts as well. So to get into the project planning board, once you're within this project builder, you can click on this icon right here, and we'll take a look. You will see a Gantt chart and a chart off to the left as well. Okay, so I'll drag this out so you can take a look. And this is a great view to take a look at everything going on within the project. So over here to the left, we can edit all of these different fields that we have for our project. So if we want to change the start date for our entire project, we can just click into this field and change that around from there. Do that with any of these other fields right here. You can also add in and take away different fields from here as well with this field selection button. And it's important to not convolute this too much by adding too many fields, especially if there's a lot of different people using it. However, if it's going to be a select number of users, then it's fine to highly customize it to the way that you would like. And so you can change those from there. You can also create relationships from this Gantt chart over here. And we only have to see the critical path right here is in the red. And we can also create these relationships very, very easily using this button right here and doing it that way. And so that was just kind of the project planning board and going over this. And then from here we got into network scheduling. So I'll go back into the project builder here and open back up this project. And when you create a network, there are a few different ways that you can schedule a network. You have down here, we can see that we have forward scheduling. And what this does is the system calculates the earliest possible start and end date for all of these activities underneath the network right here. So it'll calculate the earliest possible start and end date for these 3 activities, beginning at the start date. So it will begin from this start date and move in a forward fashion, calculating the earliest possible start and end date for each of these 3 activities. We also have backwards scheduling, which is just pretty much the opposite, where we start at the end date and we move in a backwards fashion, calculating the earliest possible start and end date for the activities. And then these earliest start and latest end dates are forwarded to the the network here as these scheduled dates. So these all come from the scheduling type that you use. We then discussed float a little bit, and there are 2 different types of float. And there are, let me just open this up here, you can see we have float right here, but we have total float and free float. And total float is the amount of time an activity can be shifted from its earliest states into the future without affecting the latest states of its successor. And free float is very similar. It's the amount of time an activity can be shifted from its early states into the future without affecting the latest states of its earliest successor. So it's a little confusing. It was mentioned that total float is usually what's generally used within different companies. And that is what we covered on day 2, which was Tuesday. Then moving on into Wednesday, we talked about we started off reviewing capacity planning, and that is done through transaction CM01. And this just allows you to take a look at what you're looking at for capacities for a particular area. And we'll just take a look at all of the work centers here. You can choose a specific work center, but this will allow you take a look at requirements, what's available for capacity, and what's left. And so right now you can see that this is in the red because we have negative 96 remaining available capacity. And that's just an easy way to look at your capacities between different work centers. We then talked about simulations, so kind of jumped around here. And what simulations are just pretty much what-if scenarios, and they allow you to create pretty much a copy of a project if you want to kind of mess around with it without ruining or changing around the existing project. And this can be done with or without referencing an existing project. So the transaction to get into creating a simulation is CJV4. And with this, you can do a few things. You can see down here. First, you can take a project that is existing and turn it into a simulation. And that would be this icon right here. So you're taking operative data and turning it into a simulation version. If you are happy with the way things are looking in your simulation, you can actually change that simulation to an actual project, which is version to operative data. And then you can also create multiple versions of the simulation right here. And I'll show you, I already have one created that we can take a look at in Project Builder. You can see right here the simulation version is M0001, and it looks identical to a normal project. The only difference is that you can see up here it says version M0001. And so that is just kind of going over the simulations and how to do those. We then got into planning resources with networks. And so I'll go back into this external goods activity. And I already went over how this purchase requisition is automatically created when you save a external network activity. And we took a look at, from here, bringing up this purchase rec in ME21N, a purchase order, and we saved that to create a purchase order. And once that happens, this box should be checked, this purchase order exists, which is grayed out, should be checked off, which will let you know that a PO exists for that particular activity. We then got into cost planning. So we took a look at cost planning for WPS Elements and went into CJ40 and took a look at how to change cost planning. It's very simple. With the WPS Elements, you can change at a very high level, or you can go down to cost element level. So we'll just go into there and actually do this. So we can plan for an entire project, plan for any of these other lower level WPS elements, and we can also double click to go down further to take a look at those, and we can also click this primary cost button to plan at the cost element level. Planning costs for networks are slightly different, and we'll take a look at planning costs for networks through the project builder. And the way that you do that is pretty simple. You can see, I'll look at one. So with this cost activity, we can plan at just a lump sum amount for that entire activity. So for this one, it's just $4,500 even. Other activities, we can say with this external activity, the price will be $200, but will be 5 each, or 5 per unit. So it could be $200 total price, but then we're going to do 5. This could be even hours, so it would end up being more, and we could plan costs that way. So those are 2 different ways of planning costs between WPS Elements and network activities. We then move into revenue planning, and we looked at CJ42, which allows you to plan at a lump sum or element level, very similar to CJ40 for WPS Elements. And then we took a look at a margin report. And this is a similar report (870-13565), and we looked at it for this project that we've been using for the entire training session. And just took a look at these totals versus plans and percentages, and just look at all of these different, to look at the report for all these different aspects of the project. From here we talked about project progress analysis. So moving back to the project builder once again, took a look at this project K15, and unfortunately I lost connection here, but there's a way to look at, we started talking about looking at progress for this particular project, and you want to make sure that these activities have a method for checking progress. So what I had briefly talked about earlier, so you want to make sure that down on this progress tab, each of these have a method for tracking progress, which is important because you want to know how you're doing with all these different activities. We also took a look at the progress analysis workbench, which is transaction CNPAWB. And we'll enter in the project that we're looking at. This is kind of a cool transaction. It allows you to quickly view the entire project or multiple projects. As you can see right here, we can enter in one, a range, or multiple. And it's a very easy way to look at how you're doing and how you're progressing within a project. So here's our entire project. We have all of our WPS elements and network activities. You can see the statuses for these descriptions, and it's kind of similar to the to the project planning board in just the sense that you have all of your information available right here. And so just looked at that for a little while, talked about that, and then looked at the progress report, which is another report, which is CNE5. And we'll execute that. And these are all just ways of looking at how you're progressing for a project. You can drill down into each of these. And take a look at all of these different aspects within the project. So that's what we covered on Wednesday. And then Thursday was the final day that we had training. And we began by talking about claims management, which is transaction CLM1. And this transaction allows you to create a claim here. And you can set these as internal, external, etc. You can also reference, so if you're creating a lot of different claims, you can reference one that you use frequently. And you can assign this to WPS Elements and change around any of these different fields here as well. You can also transfer this to the simulation that you created and take a look at current claims in transaction CLM11. And right now I don't have any selected, but you can look at what you have for current claims. From here, we look at what was called ProMan. And what this is a tool that helps you carry out project-oriented procurement. And so it gives you information about status and progress of internal and external procurement activities. And this transaction code is CNMM. And it's just one place to go when you're looking at a lot of different things within a project. So components, purchase recs, purchase orders. So you'll just put in your project definition here. I'll open this up so you can see this a little better. Okay, and so now we're highlighted this mechanical design activity. I can take a look at the components underneath that activity, different activities or elements. So I can do this for design actually. And I can take a look and see the 3 different activities and elements. Can see all of the different components for this. So I have these 4 different components here. Orders and documents, which we don't have any fields for, nor do we have any for quantities and dates, but it's an easy way to take a look at all this information within a project. And so getting towards the end of the training, we discussed milestone billing. I'll go into the project builder again so I can look at one of these milestones. Just going to open this up. And so before I discussed how when we have the sales document date button clicked on, we can utilize this milestone billing. And within milestone billing, we discussed these 2 fields right here. Percentage of completion, and this is the portion of work that the milestone represents out of the total work for a project. So if I put in 20 right here, that's saying that this milestone accounts for 20% of the entire project. And then we have our invoice percentage, and this is telling me the percent of total costs of a project. And so when this milestone is reached, whatever percentage you put in here will be billed. And there are just a few more things after that was milestone billing. There's only a few more things after that we quickly went over. It was discussed how a lot of these different A lot of the detail screens can be changed around. You can edit tabs, you can add and remove them. And there we also discussed match codes and how those are utilized. So try and find. So just talking briefly about how when you click on this match code button, you can bring up match code search and how it's easy to search around for different things within SAP. And then briefly talked about period end processing, so overhead and settlement. And then we wrapped it up for the project. And so we went from Monday through Thursday and covered a lot of basics within SAP, as WPS Elements and networks, and then got into some more complex topics like scheduling and planning revenue and planning costs. And so this concludes the video from the Enerflex Project Systems training. If there are any questions or comments, shoot us an email at info@sap-bmc.com.